Welcome, Angel.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this conversation, and I find your story so inspirational, and you have this journey. It's pretty epic in many ways. So I would love for the audience to know a little bit about your background. You were in real estate, right?
Right. So, I guess I'll share the story to becoming a messenger, what I call a messenger. So yes, I spent the first 20 years of my life in the real estate industry, and at the end of that career, I was the national chairperson for my trade association. I was um, kind of leading that organization. We represented 1 in 8 homeowners in the country. I was the volunteer lead of that organization. And I was also building with 2 partners, 51 single family houses, 56 apartments, and an office building. And I had a spiritual awakening. And the spiritual awakening came as a result of starting a yoga practice, which came as a result of injuring my knee skiing. So I injured my knee skiing. I went to see the physical therapist for about 6 weeks. And then I said, what do you think about this yoga thing? And he said to me, as long as you don't hurt, if it doesn't, as long as nothing hurts, you can do it. If something hurts, just don't do that thing. So I started a yoga practice, and pretty much I think my yoga practice started in about May of 2001. And pretty quickly, within 3 or 4 months, I had a spiritual awakening. And in that moment, it happened to be in a yoga class. I was under the tree at Final Shavasana. She took us out to the park on a beautiful August day, and my third eye just burst open, and I could see angels and golden white orbs of light going up and down this beautiful golden staircase, which was kind of weird for a real estate developer to be seeing that way at that time. And when I sat up and opened my physical eyes, everyone in the park was a golden white orb of light. So that was pretty interesting. And thankfully, I had the yoga community so that I didn't take myself off to the psychiatrist and get a big fat prescription. And I was able to navigate the spiritual awakening, which ultimately, led to a lot of changes in my life, led to leaving my first husband, led to leaving my business, led to starting my own art gallery and healing arts center, led to me discovering all these latent parts of myself that kind of popped open that I didn't even know existed, like my performer and my artist and my author and my speaker. And the healer part of me. And then I ended up in the online space in about 2008. And since then, I've been heard by millions of people all over the world. I have had clients all over the world in every English speaking country. And my work now is really about helping mission based small business owners to master the inner game of money so that they can ask for more with ease. And I'm really just excited to be here sharing with you and your audience today. So thank you for having me again.
Yes, absolutely. And when you say mission based, I just feel like, wow, that's just where a lot of energy for women often goes into because, and like for myself, so it's a second act. It sounds like you had multiple acts along the way, multiple gifts to come out.
Mm.
Now, I also know, and I always found this really fascinating, that you took your knowledge from the world of real estate and you then almost applied it to the podcast world, right?
Well, yeah, sort of. So, I started in the personal and professional development space in about 2008, and it was 10 years in to that work before I started podcasting. But, I think the truth of the matter is what actually happened for me, Shilpa, was as soon as I left the real estate industry, I wanted to have nothing to do with that. It's like as far away from me as possible. And I spent many years just opening to the metaphysics, opening to the personal and professional development world, opening to receiving a lot of coaching and training myself. And then it became clear to me when I had my art gallery and healing arts center that I had thrown out the baby with the bathwater. And so ultimately, I ended up having to kind of unify all of the gifts, the very practical as well as the metaphysical. So now when I work with my clients, I talk about, what I bring to the table is practical strategies based in 40 plus years of entrepreneurship, plus spiritual technologies based in the last 2 decades of doing my own personal explorations, as well as being trained in a variety of different spiritual modalities. And they had to come together. They had to be reunified in order for it all to work, because, you can't, as somebody said to me once, and I don't know where the quote originally came from, but you can't be so heavenly that you do no earthly good. Right. And so my early career was incredibly grounded, incredibly left brained. It was all about, putting numbers in boxes and putting people in houses and managing this real estate. In the world that I was in then, I had $100 million in assets under my management. That was a lot of responsibility at a very fairly young age now, in retrospect, that I look back. But and then I had my spiritual awakening, and I was just like, "Whoo, look, it's like Pandora's box has opened." You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, there's all these amazing parts of myself that I didn't know existed. And so I had to give that free reign. I had to give myself permission to explore and be curious and learn and grow those parts of myself that had been suppressed and repressed and depressed in the first 20 years of my career. And then ultimately, yes, it all, now I'm in the podcasting space. I mean, some of the things that I've done in the podcasting space are unusual. I was one of the very first people to sell my own show, because I understood from my real estate career the value of the real estate. I understood the value of the brand, and I understood the value of the intellectual property. So it's IP. Our content is intellectual property. So the principles are fairly similar, with the principles of buying and selling and managing real estate.
Well, I feel like the way you've articulated your journey, it feels like you were being groomed, so to speak, to be holistic in life. And because you have the yin and the yang and the deep spiritual part, you're now able to give these gifts to others. And what's really ironic in a good way is that you were able to take this very cerebral knowledge, very techy to some degree, and then later in life you use it. So, sometimes you just wonder things are being orchestrated.
Well, I definitely have been living since my spiritual awakening. I say I'm living according to GBS. I'm guided by spirit. Some people have a GPS in the car. I have the GBS. I'm guided by spirit. And so, yes, it was important for me to marry the two aspects of myself and to unify the two aspects of myself. And one of the other things that I, have experienced repeatedly is what I call divine intervention, or, receiving insight, receiving awareness, receiving from out of the blue, unexpected new ways of combining things together. So, as an example, one of the things that's recently happened for me, and as a side note, when you step into answering your calling, you are going to evolve. You're going to constantly be evolving. So there's this idea of unifying, but there's also this idea of constantly evolving. And so one of the things that I'm aware of just from, the last 6 months or so is that I've been in an evolution where now I am being called to support clients, 6, 7, 8, 9-figure clients, to be able to raise capital for their expansion, to be able to, prepare themselves for funding. And all of a sudden, by divine intervention, now all of a sudden I'm in the room with somebody who's got $1 billion hedge fund. And, all of a sudden I have clients that are looking for 5 million or 50 million or whatever million that they're looking for. And so I'm here in the middle, like this bead in the center of this necklace, that I'm the one that's the connecting link. And so one of the things that I kind of realized as I was like, okay, is this the direction you're asking me to go, Spirit? As I was in that inquiry was, am I capable of doing this? Like we all have that, when we're asked to go into the unknown, we all put that big question mark up about ourselves. Am I capable of doing this? And some people call it the imposter syndrome. And what I understood in the moment of asking that question was, oh, this is the same thing. It's the same thing as helping a person find a house. Here's the person, here's the house, link them together. It's the same thing as what I've done with speaking. Oh, there's speakers and there's a stage. The stage needs speakers, the speakers need stages, just link them together. And it's like essentially the exact same thing. These people need capital, these people have capital, just link them together. And I don't need to necessarily know anymore the technical terms of what people are doing. It's about the energy of seeing where those connections are and making those connections happen in a way that everybody wins, myself included.
And when you go through these moments, like I'm sure one day this will become a teaching point or lesson that you can give to someone else. Um, as a solopreneur woman, I often do go through this concept of imposter syndrome. And it's funny because when I first got my meditation degree, um, I thought, that's silly. Why are people talking about this imposter syndrome? I know what I know. But then it wasn't until I was in the weeds. I'm like, am I just making it up as I go?
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, we are. We are all making it up as we go. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all creators, right? And we're all making it up as we go along. And the people who are most successful in the game of making it up as we go along are those who are most confident in themselves and in their divinity, in their access to the divine orchestration, right? So I remember when I first was training in crystal healing. Like that was one of the first things I did after I left the real estate business. When I went in to tell my partner that I was leaving, he said, "What are you going to do?" And it literally fell out of my mouth. I said, "I'm going to be a crystal healer." And this was back in like 2001. Nobody was talking about this stuff back then, except the people who were in the fringy places like Mount Shasta and Sedona and places like that, right? So I'm in New Hampshire, right? My business partner looks at me literally like I've lost my mind. And so I found somebody to teach me, went to do crystal healing. And she said, you have to do some, like 3 trial people, right? To be able to pass, to get your little stamp of approval from her. So I put this person on my table and I was like, I have no freaking clue what I'm doing here. But in the moment, I just allowed myself to be guided and made this whole healing thing happen, including at one point I was listening, hearing with my inner hearing. I heard, "Go get lilacs." It was like May timeframe, so it was lilac time. I heard, "Go get lilacs," and she's lying on the table. I'm like, "I'm going to be right back. I'm hearing I need to get something." And she knew she was like a test case anyway. So I go out to the lilac bushes and I get like 7 big clumps of lilacs and I bring them in and I put the lilacs on all of her chakras. And I'm like, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. But boy, when she got off the table, she was like, that was amazing. So, trusting in the source that supplies all things is kind of the ultimate invitation.
Hard. Sometimes it's one step in front of the other, one mantra in front of the other, and ultimately you're just, at least for myself, there's some level of trust and confidence in your own intuition, perhaps.
Exactly.
Yeah. Moments before our podcast started, I was looking at your artwork, and I realized during this last part of your journey you were sharing that you've probably, maybe conscious or unconsciously, brought in a lot of your artistic knowledge as well into your new phase in your life.
Agreed. Well, it's been interesting for me, Shilpa, because at one point I just was pouring art out of me. It just like I definitely am a channel. There is no question. I have channeled a variety of archangels and ascended masters and the source directly. And I also, when I write, I channel. When I make art, I channel. And there was a period of time where I was just like I couldn't stop. I was just channeling all of this art through. Um and there have been times, let me say this for those who are listening, where I have been felt somewhat frustrated because I'm like, why am I making all this gorgeous art? And like, I now it like it doesn't add up in my own life. Okay. It doesn't add up for me to be spending the time and the energy to market the art, even though it's beautiful, even though it's amazing, even though it's powerful. It's actually of higher service for me to be serving my clients all over the world who are now serving multiple millions of other people. Like energetically, my highest value right now in my journey comes from serving my clients as a consultant, not from attempting to make art sell. However, when I do work with people, I bring all the tools to the table, right? And so, you know, they may get images that are transmitting certain frequencies to them. They may get my intellect and my 40 plus years of entrepreneurial skills. They may get sound. One of the things I did in 2009 is I recorded a award-winning crystal singing bowl CD. And so sound is one of the tools in my toolbox. There's so many tools, and the game is weaving them together. It's like going into the kitchen, right, Shilpa? You go into the kitchen, you got a lot of ingredients in the kitchen. What are we making for dinner today, right? And so I have a lot of ingredients at this point in the journey. I'm, well equipped with all the ingredients. And so, yeah, sometimes I do weave my art into working with my clients.
And I'm seeing in the background the Wickedly Smart Women. Maybe you can share
Yeah.
how that came to life.
Sure. So in 2018, I started podcasting. Um, by then, I had been 10 years in the personal and professional development space. And so I knew how to create what I call the 5-figure payday, which is a payday of at minimum $10,000. Sometimes they're as much as $99,999.99. It's still a 5-figure payday anywhere within that range. And so I already knew how to have those big ticket conversations and how to serve and speak and sell and serve in a way that allowed me to generate revenue at that level. And let me say, as a side note, that was required. Like when you think about being a mission-based business owner, you've got to consider not only what your own personal requirements are for income, but also what the business itself requires in order to support you to do the thing that you're most suited to do. And so 5-figure paydays are required in my business because I have a podcast editor and I have a team, 2 team members who are doing my podcast production stuff. And I have a CPA and I have an accountant and I have, you have all these things plus all the technology and virtual assistants and all the things. They require cash flow. So you've got to be clear on your money math and willing to, communicate the value of what you have to offer powerfully so that the market responds in a way that allows you to thrive. So I had been doing 5-figure payday, presentations for 10 years when I started my first podcast. And that show was called Men on Purpose. And I started that in 2018. Within 4 months, it was in the top 200. And I had my first 5-figure payday from that show, which was initially a $10,000 client, but ultimately turned into a $50,000 client. And I did that show for a year. And then in the spring of 2019, the Wickedly Smart Women idea came in. And I put together that show and launched it in September of 2019. I had my first 5-figure payday from Wickedly Smart Women before the show even launched. And it went to number 75 within one day internationally. So within 3 months, I got clear that I needed to think about whether or not I was done with Men on Purpose. And at the end of 2019, I just said, I think I'm going to put this on hiatus. And about 3 months later, I was still producing because I had shows in the bank. About 3 months later, I was at an event where this guy was talking about wanting his own show and wanting it to be about men and wanting to help men with their purpose. And the idea came into my head. Maybe he'd be interested in buying my show. And so I was literally the first independent podcaster to sell my show to somebody else. And so that's how that happened. And Wickedly Smart Women has been chugging along beautifully ever since and delivering great clients as well as great rankings. We're a 13-time award-winning show. And in June of last year, I started my other podcast, Leading Visionaries, which I think you've been on. So
Yeah, there are a lot of things in play here.
yeah.
And it sounds like serendipity and trust is a huge part of it. And you were mentioning something about the creativity and why the art phase occurred. And just intuitively, it occurred to me that sometimes we can't connect the dots immediately, but that energy was serving you at the time.
Absolutely. And I have no regrets for making all these paintings by any stretch of the imagination. I also do Airbnb in my house, and somebody was here recently and she said, I feel like I'm living in an art gallery. So they're here to support me, right? The paintings right now are here to support me. And yeah, you are absolutely right, Shilpa. There may come a time, who knows when, where all of a sudden the energy shifts into a different focus. And so our work, my work, your work, the work of anybody who's listening to this is really to be willing to trust, be willing to hone your intuition, be willing to unify your intellect and your intuition in powerful ways, be willing to take action on what you hear, or see or feel or know through your intuitive faculties, and be willing to celebrate and be grateful for the joy of, being on this beautiful playground that we're on.
Absolutely. Any words of wisdom you have aside from the way you just wrapped it up? It was beautifully expressed. Anything else you'd like to share? And I also, in the show notes, will have all of your information.
Great. Well, I do actually have a fun little quiz that I like to offer people. I right now I'm going by the Wealthy Life Mentor, and I'm here to help people create a life that's a work of art. And a wealthy life for me is money as well as all the other wonderful things, all the other resources that are available to us, like our time, our health, our imagination, having fun. All of those things are a part of the definition for wealth for me. So my quiz is the Wealthy Life Readiness Quiz, and you can get that at quiz.wealthylifementor.com.
Wonderful, and I will make sure that that is included in the show notes. Well, thank you, Anjel. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope in the near future you can come back and share more.
Right. Well, thank you so much for having me, Shilpa. It's been my pleasure to be here.
It's been my pleasure as well. Well, have a great day.